Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Stage Dynamics. This video is the first video in a series I'm going to be doing where I address questions from the public, students, alumni, the general public, shooting community, 2A community, self-defense community, practice community, wherever the question comes from. If I feel like it's something that's inside my lane, in my wheelhouse, I'm definitely going to address it. So if you have ideas, or if you have questions, or you'd like to see me address something, you can definitely leave it in the comments box, shoot me an email, hit me up on Instagram, Twitter, all the different social media ways that you can make contact with me. The very first video is on a subject that's very near and dear to my heart. This question actually came in via email. What is the difference between training and practice? So training versus practice, and I say versus specifically, I like to choose my words carefully. They are two different things. Even though the words do tend to be interchanged a lot, they have different meanings. Now, training, my definition of training, proper instruction of correct techniques to proficiency, observed proficiency by whoever's teaching, the instructor. Practice is practicing those same techniques that were instructed to unconscious competence. Practice is personal. Practice is usually not observed by the same person that instructed you. When you go to a class, you're receiving training. When you go to the range by yourself or with a couple of buddies, you may only be practicing. The difference is pretty monumental. Now, I'm not saying that you can't teach yourself things, that you can't train yourself how to do certain things, because you most certainly can. However, some of those things that you can teach yourself to do are better taught by someone else. If you think about, and I don't want to drag out an old, tired analogy, but if you think about modern medicine, you can learn how to do just about anything with modern medicine on the internet. Does that mean that you should necessarily be doing it without the proper guidance and the proper time invested in the practice of those techniques and the education of those techniques and all the association knowledge that comes with it? So there is a significant difference between training and practice. What I'd like to do is kind of go through the methodology and how the two kind of meld together, where training hands itself off to practice. Now, when I was kind of being groomed, if you want to use that term, to become an instructor, one of my mentors, he said to me, "Look, you never know how many lives you'll save with what you teach." And I was like, "Oh, that feels really good to think about that. It's very, passionate and encouraging." But then he went all Greek tragedy on me, and he said, "But you also don't know how many people you'll get killed if you teach bad information." So definitely he brought me way up here and then, shoved me right back down where I needed to be, because I needed to be humble at all times. When it comes to instruction, the layman may look at the instructor, and I don't mean the viewing audience, I mean just in general, as being arrogant about information, when in actuality sometimes confidence appears to be arrogance. And the difference between the two, of course, is experience. But you can get bad experience. So as a trainer, it's my job to make sure the training is as factually correct as possible, which is why you see a lot of us instructors, we do things differently. Not because there's a bunch of different methods necessarily to teach, so much as our experiences and the way we were trained help shape how we teach. Now, as far as instruction is concerned, the difference, instruction is proper instruction of correct techniques. Those correct techniques do have a small degree of opinion to them. But when it comes to functional and factual instruction, there is very, very little room for interpretation, which is why it's so important that things be as based in reality as possible versus unproven theories. So that's training. Training is proper instruction of correct techniques, but how it's applied and how is it applied as a question really sets apart your ability to practice. Education is one of those things that's probably the most researched as far as application goes. How to teach better, how to teach more effectively, and from like a law enforcement or military standpoint, how to teach really good information with a high rate of retention in the shortest amount of time possible. If you've only got X amount of weeks to get a soldier through, or get a police officer through academy, or a doctor through medical school, which is slightly different, you want to have as few dropouts as possible. You want as many people to make it through as possible. You want people to get things right on the first try, but you also don't want to make it so easy for them that they're not actually taking with them the knowledge they learn, or the knowledge they need, rather. A guy by the name of Benjamin Bloom in the mid-1950s came up with and it's with assistance of many of his colleagues in professional education, what became known as Bloom's Taxonomy. It was revised in the late 90s, but basically Bloom's Taxonomy is what I use and what I look at when I'm looking at how I'm going to teach someone, because the way they learn definitely affects the way that they're going to practice. Now, before we can get into Bloom's, we have to talk about where Bloom's came from, what it was developed on. And again, this is coming from the academic world, so the words, the terminology they use can be institutional. And I'm fine with institutional words, I'm fine with multi-syllable words if they make sense, but we can simplify things where they can be simplified. We're looking at what they call the three domains of learning. You've got cognitive, affective, and psychomotor, which are three fancy words, ways to say knowledge, attitude, and skills. The methodologies that we use to learn new skills. From those came the taxonomy. Now, the taxonomy is basically a 6-step system that takes you from education to application, which is another way of saying training to practice. So we have the first step is remembering, and then we have understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Those steps may sound like something you'd see on a huge banner in a classroom as some kind of functional remembrance to those in the class, to like, hey, these are the steps that we need to go through to learn this lesson. And that would be absolutely correct. There is no difference from an education standpoint between a classroom setting and a square range or a shoot house or scenario or a cockpit or what have you. The steps of education do not care what it is you are learning. You still have to go through them. And we think about training. What you're watching right now is not a training video. What you're watching right now is a practice supplement. It's informational only. The reason a video can never actually be training, even though we constantly call videos training videos, is because there's no way for you as the student, as the viewer, if you will, to interact with me or the person on the video who's actually giving the lesson. I'm talking right now, you can't stop me and say, hey, I have a question. That means it's media. It's not even communication because there can be no back and forth. Of course, you can leave a comment, but there's no way for us to interact in real time. So this video is a practice supplement. The information that you get in this video may only take you so far up that tiered ladder. So when we talk about the taxonomy, the first step is remembering. Remembering is the base level of education. It is as low as you can go. You're going to rote memorize something. So an example, I'm going to memorize my draw stroke. I'm going to memorize the technique goes through. Now there's a lot of other psychomotor things that go into that, such as Hebbian plasticity, which is the correct terminology for what you probably or what you may know as muscle memory. Words matter. That terminology does matter because muscles don't have memories. Same reason why you can't call practice training, training practice. So remembering is the beginning. It's not the end. Once you've memorized something, that means that you have taken the first step in education. It does not mean that you have been properly trained in the application of what you have actually memorized. So we started with remembering. Now we're up to understanding. Understanding also takes place in a training environment. Understanding means I understand the purpose behind the technique which I'm performing. So we'll stick with the draw stroke as our example. So I've memorized the proper technique to clear my garment, draw my gun. That takes place. Understanding the purpose behind the draw stroke. Obviously it's to get the gun out, right? But unless I understand that efficiency needs to be built into the memorization, I'm not going to be able to move past understanding. I have to understand the purpose, and I also have to understand the need for efficiency in what I'm performing. Now we get to applying. I've memorized my draw stroke technique. I've walked through it. I've used the crawl method, if you will. I understand the purpose, I understand the need for efficiency. So now I'm applying my draw stroke. I'm actually doing full speed presentations. But not only that, I'm able to take the static draw stroke, the techniques that I need for that draw stroke, and start to apply it to other situations that are less than ideal. I can perform a draw stroke standing facing my target. But now I'm starting to be able to apply my draw stroke to more I'm going to use the word dynamic situations or more less than ideal situations. So now I get to analyzing. This is where I feel the handoff is made. We have gone through remembering, understanding, applying. this is where the handoff from training to practice begins, because now I'm in analyzing. Analyzing is where I have to have a honest self-evaluation of my own techniques and how to build in efficiencies. When I run a class, I try to keep my classes as small as possible so there's a lot of one-on-one time when it's needed. Now, I don't walk up down the line critiquing for the sake of critiquing, but if I identify an issue that a student has, I'll address it. Be like, hey, you should probably tuck this thumb here, you should move that here, or you're wasting a lot of motion when you do this, or whatever it happens to be. Using the draw stroke as an example, a thing that I see people, some people will bow their arm out before they bring the gun up and present it when it's not needed. And that's an inefficiency that I can address. But when you get to analyzing your own draw stroke, and we're still just using draw stroke as an example, you can do that yourself. And that's where we've now moved into practice with the levels. Now, training still can take place in these next steps. But this is where you truly begin to practice to proficiency. So analyzing is taking your own information and working on efficiency, building in the most efficient method to do whatever the task is, or from a more academic standpoint, questioning the information and taking it and evaluating it yourself, which is the next step. Taking that information and making sure it's going to be effective for what you're actually trying to learn a specific bit of knowledge or a specific technique for. An example of that would be if I spend all my time doing my draw stroke from an open retention Kydex holster, but the only time I ever carry a gun is concealed, or I only carry in a retention duty holster, are you really training, then practicing for the most realistic set of situations? Now we get to evaluation. Evaluation is where I look at the information and I say, does this information fit what I need? Is this information going to assist me? Is this information true? Is this information correct? And now I'm going to evaluate my own performance. When I draw from the holster, I'm going to evaluate my efficiency. When I draw from the holster, I'm going to evaluate this technique's need and necessity for my life so I can incorporate it into my practice. Evaluating is where we run the risk of getting comfortable with what we're good at and continuing to do it, even if it's not necessarily the most useful skill for what we need to do. Finally, we get to creation. I'm going to take all the things that I've done, all the things that I've learned, and all the things that I've practiced in those steps, and I'm going to be able to create new technique or new information based on my path of education and my path of practice. I'm going to take that static draw stroke, and now I'm going to be able to apply that draw stroke in any singular situation. Any physical situation I may find myself in, I'm still going to be able to access my gun. Now, some people may say, well, it's just a draw stroke. I'm just using the draw stroke as an example, but I use the draw stroke as an example to make a point. Sometimes we process through these steps without really cognitively, consciously, if you will, being aware of it. Some of these things just become implicit knowledge. You just learn how to do it without ever learning how to do it, if that makes sense. I don't teach a large block of instruction on the draw stroke in class. I will identify inefficiencies in someone's draw stroke, if we're still using the draw stroke for an example, but I don't actually teach a block of instruction where I go through a multi-step method or my step method or the method I use or anything like that, because the draw stroke to me should be a natural thing, and it should be done with the intent of what the gun is being brought out to do. And that's where creation comes into play. If I'm drawing a firearm to shoot from retention, there are steps that will not be included. If I'm drawing a firearm to go to full presentation, I don't care what happens between leaving holster and sights. I don't care as long as it's efficient. As long as the draw stroke is efficient and fast, what happens in between doesn't matter. When I jump over a puddle, I don't think about what I'm doing between takeoff and landing. Make sense? Because the purpose is to get over the puddle. So the purpose is to get the gun out. So that's where creation comes into stand. I can use my level of education to assist me in creating a solution for a problem in real time. And that's where training and practice work together. But it is training versus practice. You can't go to the range and train yourself. Now, you can learn things, you can teach yourself things, but you can't actually train yourself. You need someone there to assist an impartial person to help you evaluate what's going on. Now understand, not everybody can take a class, and this video isn't trying to guilt you into taking a class. However, how serious are you taking what you're doing? If you're a self-defense shooter and you've never attended a class, you have to ask yourself, what have you actually learned through what you taught yourself? Are you just reaffirming things that you're good at, or are you pushing your performance envelope and trying to think of new ways to reach a more efficient endpoint? Are you finding ways to do things better? There's a lot of stuff that we can get good at by ourselves. The internet's really good at showing us people who've taken something and worked it 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 until they get good at it. Shot timers are a great example of that. Guys put videos on Instagram all the time of them doing 1 second from concealment, which is impressive. It's fast. That's good repetition, but that's at the remembering level. That's the lowest level of education. Because are they going to take that 1 second retention or 1 second draw time and be able to process it through every other step and then get to a point of creation where they can take that same technique and apply it to a real world situation with moving people, and where your cue is most likely going to be visual instead of audible? If you've never considered the fact that your reaction times are going to be affected by the situation in which you might have to shoot someone in self-defense, then you're right there at remembering. There are many, many, many things that you can become proficient with without ever taking a class. Reloading, malfunction drills, accuracy. You train to receive proper affirmation and new ways to apply that which you have already developed proficiency in. What we're able to actually teach ourselves is pretty limited. And I say this as a professional student myself. I still attend classes even though I'm an instructor and I'm out there teaching, and there's some people who know my name, and I've been on, I've been in some magazines and stuff like that. All that stuff's irrelevant from my standpoint as a professional student. I still seek out knowledge. I will shamelessly steal any information from another instructor with giving him credit that can save one of my students' lives. Because at the end of the day, that's what I'm all about. I believe that all our instructors should be on the same team. That being said, I'll be the first guy to call out a guy who's putting out bad info. Now there's where the difference is. You can't eat your own so much as police your own. As a student, it's your responsibility to take what you learn in a class and practice it to proficiency. But I feel like it's also your responsibility to pass on what you're proficient at to other students. If you know you got your draw stroke down and you've had your draw stroke verified by other people, and everybody says, oh man, you draw the gun better than anybody I've ever seen. Are you helping anybody reach your level of proficiency, or are you guarding knowledge? You can teach too. You don't have to wear a title of instructor. You don't have to self-apply a title of instructor to help people get better. And this comes to my final point, which is when we get practice. I'm at the range. The range is going to kind of dictate what you can and can't do. I get that. But are there other shooters there, and can you help them? Did you go with friends, or did you go by yourself? My personal feeling is never go to the range and practice by yourself. And make sure you and whoever you go to the range with, you guys have an understanding that you're going to call each other out when you make mistakes or when you can increase efficiency. Shooting is fun, but shooting, for me, at least this is my personal feeling, if you're shooting in any way defensively, if you've got a human-shaped target, if you're shooting for human zones of the body, you should have a mind towards increasing your proficiency at self-defense shooting. So you need to be calling each other out, but also coaching each other on how to get more proficient. And that's where practice comes in. It's very hard to practice by yourself, and the main reason for that is because we just have this subconscious desire to practice what we're already proficient at, because we don't want to leave the range feeling bad. Now I'm going to do a future video on practice plan, and again, this video was probably longer than maybe some people expected, but I wanted to take everyone through the process that we have to go through before we can actually get to a place where we can use the knowledge and create new knowledge with the knowledge that we already have, or create new efficiencies, new techniques, new methods with the knowledge that we already have. So yes, there is a significant difference between training and practice, and I think I've kind of laid that out. When we work through the taxonomy, you can kind of see where the handoff takes place, where training becomes practice. But it's circular, because then we need to work on that, take those same proficiencies and work our way back through training to increase them. It's a never-ending process. That's why me as an instructor, as a teacher, it's my job to constantly re-educate myself and constantly reaffirm that which I already know. If there's one thing I've learned, it's the more I learn, the less I know, which means I'm constantly reaffirming my information through as many multiple sources of education as I can get, to make sure that when I teach, when people entrust me with their time, that I'm giving them the best information I can give them. I'm not just teaching them what I heard, I'm not just teaching them what I learned 20 years ago, and I'm not teaching them just based on my own personal singular experiences. I'm Aaron Cowan with Sage Dynamics. Practice and train accordingly.